Hey everybody, and welcome to Thrive at the Top podcast. Today's episode, we're doing a deep dive into our proprietary framework that we use to support, to train, to run workshops, and to literally implement mental health strategies, solutions, and resilience programs with all the organizations that we partner with. So this is the SAFE Pillars Framework, so SAFE, and I'm going to go into a deep dive about it, really get an understanding of how we implement this, how we apply this into the work that we do with the companies, organizations that partner with us. So sit back and enjoy, and let me know, hopefully in the show notes or in the comments, if you're wanting any clarifications, if you're wanting to connect with us, if you want to go deeper on this framework, then we'd be happy to take a question, ready to connect and ready to support you. Why do we even have a framework in the first place? I think frameworks are really important because it allows us to be consistent with the work that we deliver, even though we tailor-meet our services and how we implement and roll out the support services, workshops, and programs into organizations. However, the framework allows us to be consistent, that we're always making sure that the foundations of mental health and resilience are always met with a framework. And then the benefits of having a framework for you as a partner, when you partner with Complete Wellbeing Global, is that it's easy for you to understand, it's easy for you to then implement and roll out into your organization, because sometimes facilitators and trainers will come in and they've got all these fancy jargons, they've all got this information, and sometimes it's from information overload. For the trainer and facilitator, obviously it is not, because it's their expertise, right? But when we have a framework, it's easy for you to understand and it's easy for you to implement into your organizations. And again, then it also becomes super consistent for you and super easy to apply in your organizations. So no confusion there, but it's very clear, gives you clarity, gives you step-by-step procedures into how to make sure that you're not missing any gaps, but you're making sure that mental health and resilience is covered with the step-by-step framework. One of the most common questions I get is often around how do we as a mining industry, as a mining company, operationalize mental health. I get that the industry itself is primarily based on science, on hard facts, and mining has led for years in technological advancement and safety. You are scientific, you are factual. Now there comes mental health and abstract. Now it's a compliance issue. You have to adhere. The whole topic of psychological safety. How do you as an organization now put these things in place to make sure that one, you're compliant, and two, as people, you care about your workforce, because at the end of the day, they really affect your bottom line. So I understand that you care about them, but there again, the challenge arises. How do you now operationalize this abstract thing? In this conversation, I'm here to demystify psychological safety in the workplace, or how do you as an organization implement or operationalize mental health strategies in your organization. I'm going to really simplify the whole concept, right? I'm going to give you a roadmap, 4 things that you need to make sure you have in place so that you tick all or most of the boxes under the topic of making sure your environment is psychologically safe. So step number 1, I suggest that you start from the top bottom. Why? Because largely the responsibility of ensuring that the environment is psychologically safe starts with management. You're going to have to make sure that you yourself understand what psychological safety is in order for your organization to meet the demands, the needs, and the requirements of your workforce. To make sure that your team is well supported, you're going to have to understand the signs, the symptoms, the whole presentation of what mental health looks like. And there is no expectation, there is no pressure on anyone to know the whole spectrum. But my recommendation is you need some mental health literacy. And what is that? That is you simply having an understanding and awareness of what mental health looks like, and then so when they fall away from that ideal, you're able to identify someone who's starting to get unwell. You should be able to have some understanding, because when you are aware, you'll be able to offer early intervention, early support for your team so that they don't have to go through the recovery process. You pretty much have to go through early intervention. So that's the first step. Health promotion. You're going to have some policies, some programs in place to promote health within your organization so that they can support themselves and support the rest of the team. You yourself need to be aware of what to look out for. And then from that stage, you'll be able to support them and ensuring that they don't get to the side where you're now reactionary, but you're actually in control of the situation and you're picking out early symptoms well before it gets to the other stage where it's now a catastrophe. This is our recommendations of what you need to do first as a CEO, director, and manager of the organization. The second step that you need to have in place to make sure that your environment is psychologically safe is that you're going to have to be able to have a plan of action when you or your staff are starting to get unwell. You need to have policies and programs and a referral system. You as a CEO or director, it makes sense to have this in place already. So when my staff do get unwell, this is risk management in the mining in terms of our equipment, the environment. Similarly, in mental health support and psychological safety, you need to be having a risk management plan. So when someone starts to get unwell, where are we going to refer them to? And obviously the best practice is you having to have vetted and gone through a specific company that's going to offer this support for you. Best practice is you've got a company in-house that you already have vetted, you trust their expertise, and you know that they are available over an email. And when you refer them to this organization, this company, it's not a long waiting. That obviously probably by the time they eventually get seen, if it's several weeks or months, the person is, they've resolved the issue, they've worked the things out, or they've gone far down the spectrum, they're so unwell that now the situation is really catastrophic. They're going to have to stop work. The third step is you are going to have something in place in order to support your staff when they are returning back to work. Now you need to be having a return to work strategy, a return to work policy and program that you can transition them safely. And safely, I mean they're mentally transition safely back into their roles. Right? And I know we already do this in physical health. But similarly now, you're going to have to make sure that they are mentally fit to resume their responsibilities. And there has to be some titration. There has to be some system, right, into transitioning them. That it depends on the situation, the severity of the mental challenge that they had prior to them returning back to work in a responsible way, in a sustainable way that they will be able to be inducted safely back into their roles. This is one of the things you're going to have in place. And how do you assess that they're mentally fit to return to work? And this is where it comes back into you having a team, or we are in partnership with some mental health experts to make sure that your staff are fit to return to work. And when they are fit to return to work, how much can they do and at what pace can they now take back or resume back their duties? Outsource for mental health experts who will run the mental health assessments and to do these assessments on your staff to make sure that they are fit to return to work and you're transitioning them safely back into work. The fourth step that is required in order to make sure that you are creating a psychologically safe environment is you're going to have some crisis management policy and program in place. Similarly, I'll refer you back to what you've always done in your workforce, right? When there's a medical emergency, change can be a crisis. When an accident has occurred, for example, a mine has collapsed, dam have collapsed, something has happened that obviously it was an error. The worst case scenario is to be reactionary. The worst case scenario is to have nothing in place to support yourself and your team when a crisis happens. When there's an accident in the mines or in your environment happens, who gets the blame? The responsibility falls on the managers. And there's so many scenarios that I've heard where there was no psychological support for you as a leader when a crisis happens, who's taking care of your mental welfare? And then we also move it to your staff. When you lose one of your members to injury, when you lose them to death, how do you support the rest of the staff that have witnessed that incident? We should not ever expect to get over it. There is always some trauma when you witness an accident. You need to be having a crisis management team that come in the moment the crisis occurs. Talking about psychologists, counselors, people who know what to do in a mental health crisis. Some people, can handle a crisis. Some people can't. And with experts, they know how to identify who's struggling, how they're struggling post and during the scenario. You need to be having a team that comes in and supports your team at that level. Even after the crisis has happened, people need support and for a duration of different times. It could be counseling, it could be brief solution focused therapy, right? Whatever they need, you need to be having, again, not going through the Google, right? Or just trying to figure out where do we signpost these people to, where you don't even have a system or a follow-up in how much support is required. You need to be having a crisis management team that can handle the crisis that your staff is going through. That's how you ensure that your environment is psychologically safe and is prepared for a crisis when it happens. Thank you for joining us in this episode. Hopefully, I've managed to give you some insight into how Complete Wellbeing Global supports and implements mental health and resilience programs into your organization. Again, I reiterate that it's mainly for consistency and to make sure we don't miss out on anything. And for you, it's easy to apply, it's easy to understand, and therefore easy to implement and roll out within your organization. So if anything that we've spoken about today, if it's raised questions and you're thinking, I would really like to hear more, or if you're ready for this level of support, then definitely DM us or email, and we'll gladly be able to arrange mental health workplace consultant session where we'll deep dive into your organization, try to understand your needs and your gaps, and then from there we can implement a tailored program to meet the mental health resilience of your organization. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.